All right, let's get into it. For so many of your students, the world of gaming is just second nature. It's as normal as the classroom. But how did it get to be this huge cultural force? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into the research of Dr. Sudheendra S G to break down a really pivotal moment in media history, the very first great console war. And trust me, it's a story about tech, marketing, and a rivalry that pretty much changed everything. So, to really get the 1990s, you have to imagine the video game world as this kingdom, and it was ruled by a single, seemingly untouchable monarch. It was an empire built on the backs of plumbers and princesses. But what happens when a brand new challenger, one with a totally different attitude, decides to storm the castle and try to take the throne? That's the story we're going to unpack today.
So let's set the stage here. By the late 1980s, one name was basically synonymous with video games, and that name was Nintendo. After the video game industry crashed in the early 80s, Nintendo didn't just bring it back to life, they were the industry.
And the scale of their dominance, it was just staggering. At its absolute peak, the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, held an unbelievable 90% of the American video game market. 90%. Characters like Mario and Link from The Legend of Zelda, they weren't just popular, they were full-blown cultural icons. To pretty much everyone, it looked like Nintendo's reign was unshakable. But, there's always a challenger waiting in the wings, and this one had some pretty surprising origins. See, Sega didn't start out making video games. It was actually founded to manage coin-op games, think slot machines, for U.S. military bases over in Japan. The name itself is actually short for service games. Now, they eventually got into video games, but their first shot at taking on Nintendo with their Master System console, well, let's just say it didn't go well. It was a flop.
But Sega learned a ton from that failure. They figured out pretty quick they couldn't beat Nintendo by playing the same game. No, they had to change the rules of the game entirely. And that's exactly what they did by kicking off the next generation of technology, igniting what we now call the 16-bit console war. So Sega's secret weapon was just superior technology. The jump from 8-bit to 16-bit, you have to understand, this wasn't just some small upgrade, it was a massive leap forward in what was possible. All of a sudden, games could have way richer, more detailed graphics, more complex sound and music, and the gameplay was so much faster and smoother. Sega's new console, the Genesis, it was an absolute powerhouse.
And oh boy, they were not shy about it. Sega launched one of the most aggressive and, honestly, brilliant marketing campaigns in history. This tagline, it was a direct shot at their rival. It was cheeky, it was bold, and it perfectly captured their whole strategy. Make Nintendo look like the old, slow, kid's toy and position the Genesis as the cool, powerful, next-gen machine.
Of course, you can't have a war without a champion, and to go up against Mario, Sega created an icon of their own, Sonic the Hedgehog. And he was everything Mario wasn't. He was fast, he was impatient, he had this edgy attitude. Sonic was specifically engineered to appeal to teenagers, kids who felt like they had maybe outgrown Nintendo's more family-friendly world. He was the literal embodiment of Sega's cool factor.
But you can't poke the bear and not expect it to wake up, right? Nintendo wasn't just going to sit back and watch. In 1991, they fired back, launching their own 16-bit console, the Super Nintendo, or the SNES. And with legendary games like Super Mario World and A Link to the Past, Nintendo proved they were still absolute masters of game design. The war was officially on. Now, all this fierce competition for market share, it had this kind of unintended side effect. To stand out from the crowd, developers started pushing the boundaries of what a video game could even be. And that led to content that was more mature, more realistic, and for a lot of people, way more controversial.
A perfect example of this was the explosion of the fighting game genre. It all started in the arcades with Street Fighter II, a game that just completely revolutionized competitive gaming, with its deep mechanics and unforgettable characters. It became a global phenomenon, and whichever console could bring that experience home was going to have a huge advantage.
But then came Mortal Kombat. And this is where the core difference between Nintendo and Sega became crystal clear. Nintendo, sticking to its family-friendly brand, demanded the game be censored. The blood was literally changed to gray sweat. Sega, on the other hand, went the other way. They let you unlock the full, gory arcade experience with a secret cheat code. So for teenage gamers, the choice was obvious. Sega had the real version. And that one decision really helped shape the conversations we still have about media violence today. All that controversy over Mortal Kombat's violence didn't just sell consoles, it got the attention of parents and even politicians. The industry was really at a crossroads. It was suddenly very clear that video games weren't just for kids anymore, and this forced the whole industry to mature and really to take responsibility for its own content.
And the result of all that? The creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, the ESRB, in 1994. And this wasn't just some boring technicality. This was the moment the video game industry officially grew up. It created the very rating system that educators and parents still rely on today. It was the industry's way of saying, okay, we get it. Games are a mainstream medium now for a diverse audience of all ages.
So looking back at Dr. Sudheendra's research, why does this piece of media history really matter for you as an educator? Well, it's because this war, this whole rivalry, it laid the foundation for the gaming landscape that your students are living in right now, and it offers some really powerful lessons about technology, media, and culture.
When you boil it down, we see some really powerful lessons. First, competition drove incredible innovation. Both companies had to make better tech and better games to survive. But it was marketing that truly defined the audience, with Sega just brilliantly carving out a whole new demographic of teenagers. That embrace of a more diverse audience fueled massive growth. And to manage that, the industry learned that self-regulation could actually build trust and legitimacy. And through it all, we saw that a passionate community, kids arguing in schoolyards and in magazines, can propel an entire medium forward.
The war between Nintendo and Sega, it really defined an entire era. It transformed video games from kind of a niche hobby into this mainstream cultural powerhouse. But just as this epic battle was reaching its peak, a new challenger was getting ready to step into the ring. And they weren't coming with a better cartridge, they were coming with a CD-ROM. The arrival of Sony's PlayStation would once again change the rules of the game and set the stage for the industry we all know today.